What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and today's video is really for you e4 players trying to find a response against f5 with the Duras Gambit. Now what I just said might sound silly because we all know that the Duras Gambit is far from sound. However, if you look at the Elite Chess database, white only wins or draws 54% of the time. This is over a half, but there's no good reason white shouldn't be winning in the 90 mark percentile here. I mean, this is just a terrible option for black. So I thought I'd make this video to hopefully make a little bit of a dent and prepare you e4 players on how to beat it. And here we're going to start off by simply just taking the pawn right off the board. There's no good reason to not go up a pawn at move 2. And right now we actually have this threat of queen h5. The two most popular moves that you're probably going to see here are knight f6, defending that square, and also king f7, not a good move, but we have seen players such as Magnus Carlsen play it in bullet chess a couple times. Let's first cover a move like knight c6. What happens if black just offers up this pawn and then tries to develop their pieces? Well guys, here we now have queen h5 with check, forcing this move g6, and now we're just, again, going to take that pawn right off the board. Notice here, if black takes on g6, we could win a rook, but more than that, we could actually just win with mate in 1. And right now we actually have two different threats that would result in a game over. And here, if black plays a move like knight f6, we play g7 with check. And yes, guys, we lose our queen at move 5. But at move 6, we're going to grab our queen off the side of the table and put it right back on h8. Guys, this position is simply crushing for white. So y'all, going back to this position after we accept the gambit, if you see a move like knight c6, c5, etc., you're simply going to have a one game with queen h5 check. What about this move king f7? Sometimes black's going, look, I played one bad move, why not play a second? Well, against this, guys, I mean, we could just play a move like knight f3 and simply be ahead of pawn with a king on f7, and we're going to have a much better game. But the best option here is actually queen h5 with check, and after g6, capturing off that pawn. Now notice here, black cannot capture this pawn back unless they want to lose their rook. So we'll probably see this move king g7, in which case we'll take the h-pawn, and after rook takes h7, white has a lot of different options here. In one of our previous videos, we covered how Akshat Chandra played this move queen d1 in this position against Carlsen, who was playing with black, and somehow Carlsen managed to win that game. I think it more speaks to his level of play than the actual position or opening. But guys, I'm going to be recommending this move queen f3. We're keeping this queen active, really getting a large scope of the entire position. We're still on the king side of the board, and on top of that, it's going to be very hard for black to really attack this queen at all. Usually if we bring our queen out early in the game, our queen could get kicked around, but here there's really no way for black to take advantage of our queen being out in the f-file. And here, if black just plays a move like knight f6, we now have this key idea of bishop d3. Do I usually recommend that you play a move like bishop d3, stopping your pawn from moving, therefore stopping this bishop from covering the c1 h6 diagonal? My answer is no, but in this position, guys, this bishop on d3 is extremely active, attacking the rook on h7. Our queen as well is extremely active here. Notice if a move like rook h8, we can actually just slide one step to the right with queen g3. Here, if something like king h6, we have game over. And if king f7, okay, we're going to play queen g6 check anyways, continue with a move like knight f3. And y'all, we're simply up 2 pawns, a ton of development, and somehow this king is all the way to e6. This game is nearly over. Now against this key queen f3 and bishop d3 idea, what happens if black doesn't go to h8 but instead plays a move like rook h6? Whole idea being we don't have queen g3 and then queen g6 check. Well, now we can play this move g4, expanding on the king side, threatening g5, which would obviously win a ton of material. And now if this rook goes back to a square like h8, we now have this idea of b3. We obviously don't want to move this bishop back so we can get this bishop into the game on c1. Why not just fianchetto this, try to pin the knight potentially on f6? And obviously here, guys, we have a very active game, white with over a +5 advantage. So guys, that covers this move king f7, in which case we're simply going to play queen h5 with check, take the pawn on g6, take the pawn on h7, and then bring your queen back to f3 with that bishop d3 idea, potentially g4 options in the air, just expanding on the king side, and you're going to have a simply one game. What about this move knight f6? Now this is a much better option for black. Even then, white is much better, but it's not completely winning at this point. This knight is protecting the h5 square, so obviously we can't play this, but what we can do is just expand in the center with d4. Whole idea being against d5, we don't want to lose our pawn on f5. We're going to play bishop d3. If we allow black to just take this pawn on f5 and continue developing their pieces, they're actually going to have a pretty solid game. We need to defend this pawn, and notice here it's actually kind of hard for black to team up on this f5 pawn at all. I mean, what other minor pieces are going to be able to attack this pawn? This knight on f6 is not attacking that pawn anytime soon, and neither is this knight on b8. So here there's a few different options. We're going to start off by covering this move e6, which most of the time you're going to see at one point or another. We're also going to cover this move knight c6, and then finally the main option here for black, c5, expanding on the queen side. So first, guys, this move e6. In general, what do you do if you see this e6 move? Well, some players here like to play knight f3, give this pawn back, and then simply castle kingside with a little bit of an edge in development. But I like being up material. I like being up a pawn. I don't see why we can't take on e6. I'm not really too worried about the compensation that black's going to get out of it if we play this position well. I mean, here, if something like bishop takes e6, okay, we're just going to continue developing. And notice here, after bishop d6, a ton of players with the white pieces tend to castle kingside and then play a move like queen e2. But my personal recommendation is that you play queen e2 first, because right now this bishop can't play a move like bishop g4 as it's pinned to the king on e8. So here black has to defend it with a move like queen e7, and against this we can now simply castle kingside, continue with a move like rook e1, doubling up on this bishop. Obviously, if this bishop moves right now, we're simply going to capture the queen on e7 and win a full piece. And after a move like rook e8, I mean, there's a ton of different options. The computer likes this move queen d1. I personally don't find it a very natural move. I personally would probably play moves like c3 and h3, just continue to kind of limit the activity of our opponent's pieces. Knight g5 is also playable, just attacking the bishop on e6 right away. It's really up to you. There's a ton of different options here, but no matter how you cut this up, I mean, white's just ahead. So y'all, that covers this move e6. Simply capture on e6, play knight f3, and always be eyeing queen e2 ideas, pinning that bishop before you castle kingside, and you should be completely fine. What about this move knight c6? Black just developing. Well, in return, we're just going to continue to develop. And notice, guys, this pawn on f5, which is currently defended, is really making things hard for black. I mean, besides this move e6 trying to open up their position, what else can they really do? g6 cannot be played, trying to fianchetto this bishop because we simply capture the pawn, and there's no way to gang up on this pawn on f5. Sometimes black will try a move like knight b4, but in that case, just play knight c3. And okay, if you take our bishop, we're simply going to take back. And they still have that big issue of what to do with that pawn on f5. So what about this move e6 now? Well, again, we're just going to take that pawn. And after a move like bishop takes e6, black is not one move away from castling. So here we can castle kingside. And now against a move like queen d7, we need to play active chess here, guys. If we give black time to play moves like bishop d6, castle kingside, and get rooks on f8 and e8, we could actually find ourselves in quite a bit of trouble. We have to be aggressive right out of the get-go, and that's starting off with bishop b5, pinning the knight on c6 to the queen on d7, eyeing knight e5 ideas. And if bishop d6 here, defending that square, well, we're going to play knight e5 anyways. The whole idea being if bishop takes, we're going to take back with that d-pawn. And now black technically has some options. I mean, they can bring their knight back to g8. If knight e4, we can keep kicking this knight around. And if a move like knight g4, we can actually play this move knight d2. A nice little idea against the Duras Gambit. Whole idea being we want to bring this knight to f3 and defend that passed pawn on e5. And if black just takes the pawn off the board, we now have rook e1 attacking this minor piece, pinning the knight on c6 to the queen on d7. There's a ton of different threats here. We have queen e2 and knight f3 on the way. And guys, this game is probably going to be over very quickly. So y'all, going back to this key position, if you see a move like knight c6 developing their pieces, you don't got to play something crazy like g4. Just continue to develop your own pieces as well. And I'm just not seeing any way that black is going to really be able to move or develop any of their pieces without e6. And you know the deal there. We're going to take on e6, castle kingside, queen e2, and we're in business. What about this move c5? Now, this is the most popular option online, black advancing on the queen side, and we have to be a little bit careful here. I am not going to recommend taking this pawn because black has this move e5 and things get crazy very quickly. But instead, I think this move c3 is definitely white's strongest, just defending the pawn on d4. And honestly, more importantly, against c4, we can now play bishop c2. Whole idea being we're still defending that pawn on f5. I mean, we do not want to be in a situation where we got to play something like bishop e2 and allow black to have all of this space and simply win our pawn on f5. Our pawn on f5 is our biggest strength against the Duras Gambit, so we cannot let black just capture it right off. We're defending this pawn on f5. We have a very active bishop on c1 as well. And again, I mean, black eventually is going to have to play this move. And when you do see this, just take it right off the board and then play queen e2, pinning this bishop to the king. Notice, by the way, if a move like queen d7, we actually have bishop f5 doubling up on that pin piece. And if a move like queen e7, which, by the way, is black's best option here, we're still just going to continue to develop with knight f3, eyeing the square of e5, castling kingside on the way. Two active minor pieces here. We're going to continue to develop our pieces. And guys, this position is nearly winning for white. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to learn how to play the Elephant Gambit from the black perspective, click that video to the left. If you'd like to learn how to play the Danish Gambit as white, click that video to the right. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.